Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to really try and unpack a topic that, well, it touches all of us, really, whether we think about it much or not. The world of the ultra rich.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And sometimes maybe a little disturbing.
Exactly. For this deep dive, we've pulled some, I think, really compelling insights from a transcript, Why You Should Hate the Rich Even More, featuring Rob Larson from the Chris Hedges YouTube channel.
A pretty provocative title.
It is. But our goal here isn't about hate, it's about understanding. We want to cut through some of the noise, maybe reveal some surprising facts, and give you a clearer picture. Who are the super wealthy? How do they live? And importantly, what's their impact on the rest of society?
Right, because their world can seem so separate from ours.
Totally. So get ready for, hopefully, some aha moments. This is where it starts to get really interesting. There's that famous line, maybe it's true, maybe not, between F. Scott Fitzgerald and Hemingway. Fitzgerald says, the rich are different from us.
And Hemingway supposedly shoots back, yes, they have more money.
Classic Hemingway, right? Right. But the source material we looked at really argues Fitzgerald was onto something deeper, that the rich are a cocoon of wealth and privilege. It's not just that they're isolated, it actually changes the people around them. Workers, hangers-on, servants.
Flatterers,
Yeah.
sycophants.
Yeah.
Yeah, they all become sort of compliant figures in the orbit of the wealthy person.
Exactly. And this wealth, as Fitzgerald showed in, Gatsby or The Rich Boy,
Hmm.
it can lead to seeing other human beings almost like commodities you can just discard. Colleagues, employees, kitchen staff.
Gardeners, even friends and family sometimes. It's like if you don't fit into their world or serve their needs, you just disappear from their lives.
That idea of the cocoon, it really struck me. I actually, I saw a bit of that myself. When I was about 10, I was on a scholarship at this very exclusive boarding school in New England.
Oh, wow.
And these kids, my classmates, 10 years old, they would just so callously order around the chauffeurs, the cooks, the nannies. It was startling.
Even at that age.
Yeah, and I remember their fathers, who the kids barely saw, by the way, showing up in these big limousines, but they'd bring personal photographers, even mistresses sometimes, all for PR, to create this image, this fake picture of being involved dads.
Wow. That's quite a manufactured reality.
It was a very stark lesson very early on about that kind of deep insulation.
And this protection,
Yeah.
it goes way beyond just like awkward social interactions.
Yeah.
The source points out how when the kids of the rich get into real trouble,
Yeah.
there's always this whole army ready, lawyers, publicists, political connections, all deployed to protect them.
Like a safety net normal people just don't have.
Exactly. The source even calls out George W. Bush and Donald Trump's lives as, quote, case studies in the insidious affirmative action for the rich. Basically, a system rigged to shield them from consequences.
That phrase, insidious affirmative action, that's powerful. And that kind of protection, it must breed a certain detachment, right?
Definitely. The material talks about a snobbish disdain
Mm-hmm.
the rich often hold for, well, for everyone else. Poor, middle class, seen as uncouth parasites.
Or just nuisances, people to be managed, placated, controlled.
Yeah, endured. All while they focus on getting more power, more money.
And this kind of insatiable selfishness and hedonism that the source describes, it's presented almost like a pathology, something most of us can't really fathom.
Well, the claim made in the source, and it uses strong words, is that the depravity of our ruling elite is kind of hidden, covered up by relentless propaganda.
Propaganda from where?
PR firms working for them, for corporations, politicians who are compliant, maybe clueless entertainers, a sort of vapid, corporate-funded popular culture.
All promoting the rich as leaders, people we should look up to.
Right, blinding us, the source argues, to what's really going on.
It really brings back that Fitzgerald quote about Tom and Daisy Buchanan and Gatsby. You know the one?
Oh yeah, they were careless people.
They smashed up things and creatures and then retreated back into their money or their vast carelessness.
And let other people clean up the mess they had made. Chillingly accurate sometimes, it feels
Yeah,
like.
it does. And if you look back historically, this isn't exactly a new idea, is it?
Not at all. Philosophers going way back, Aristotle, Machiavelli, Tocqueville, Adam Smith, Marx, they all saw this kind of natural antagonism between the wealthy and the masses.
Aristotle, what did he say in politics? Something about authority.
Yeah, he wrote, those who have too much are neither willing nor able to submit to authority. And even more pointedly,
Go on.
the evil begins at home. For when they are boys, by reason of the luxury in which they are brought up, They never learn, even at school, the habit of obedience.
Wow. So the implication is they're trained from childhood in manipulation, not obedience or accountability.
That's the core question it raises, yeah.
Mhm.
What does it mean for society when the people with the most power have essentially been schooled against following rules that apply to everyone else?
That is a deeply unsettling thought, especially about the psychological side. But okay, how does this insulated mindset, this difference, translate into actual power and influence in the world? The numbers.
The numbers are pretty staggering.
They really are.
Our source stresses that right now we're seeing the largest transference of wealth upwards in American history since the Gilded Age. Back in the late 1800s. That era of huge fortunes, but also massive inequality.
Yeah, we're talking levels of concentration we haven't seen in a century or more. The scale is just, it's hard to wrap your head around sometimes.
So where does this data come from? Is it reliable?
Well, most of it cited in the source is from the World Inequality Database. That's a big international group.
Hmm.
Includes top economists like Thomas Piketty. So, yeah, it's pretty solid data.
And what does it show? For the U.S., say.
Okay, so for the U.S. in 2022, the richest 1% of households owned 35% of all the wealth. Everything cash, property, stocks, bonds. 35% for the top 1%.
35%. Okay, how does that compare to, well,
Yeah.
everyone else? Right. So the middle 40%, that's a big chunk of the population they owned. Not quite 28%, less than the top 1%.
And the bottom half, the bottom 50%.
Get this. They owned about 1.5%, just 1.5% of all the wealth. And often, that's actually negative if you factor in debt.
Wow, so 1% has vastly more than the bottom, 90% combined?
Pretty much. And globally, it's a similar picture. The richest 1% worldwide owns about 40% of all global wealth.
40%. So what does that concentration actually mean for things like economic stability or just opportunity for regular people?
Well, it suggests a system that's incredibly tilted, right, where opportunity might be shrinking for the majority while wealth just keeps accumulating at the very top. It raises huge questions about fairness and the future of the economy.
Yeah, it really does. We're talking about a level of wealth concentration that feels almost medieval in a way. And the source also mentions this isn't just about wealth within one country, right? There's a global dimension.
Absolutely. It talks about a supranational quality to this ruling class, a kind of transnational billionaire class.
What does that mean, supranational?
It means they can move effortlessly around the world. They collect passports, visas, residency documents like trading cards. The source literally says vaults full of them.
How do they manage that? Isn't getting citizenship complicated?
Well, it's interesting. Some countries, particularly ones needing cash, basically sell citizenship or residency. You invest a couple $100,000 in, say, Spain, Greece, Ireland, Portugal.
And that gives you residency or even a passport.
It puts you on the path. And getting an EU passport that way is incredibly valuable for global mobility. Plus, they have staff, right? People whose entire job is just managing the paperwork for all these different citizenships and homes.
So it's just another administrative task for them, facilitating this kind of borderless existence.
Exactly. And this mobility, it's not just about having nice vacation homes everywhere. It links directly to things like, parking money overseas, tax avoidance, secrecy.
Right, like the Panama Papers leak showed us just how vast that hidden world of offshore money is.
Precisely. That was just one glimpse into how extensive it can be.
Okay, so they have immense wealth, global mobility. Let's shift focus a bit. What's daily life actually like inside this bubble? The source uses this term, richistan.
Yeah, Richistan. It paints a picture of a place where the wealthy basically have no contact at all with the rest of us. Unless, we happen to work for them.
And that creates this reinforcing loop, right? This bubble
Where, as the source puts it, anything they say that's ridiculous or stupid just gets validated. Because who's going to contradict them?
the source mentions Elon Musk as a kind of poster child for this.
Yeah, it suggests often,
Mm-hmm.
let's say outlandish statements are frequently met with agreement or silence within his immediate circle, reinforcing that disconnect from maybe more grounded perspectives.
And the physical environment itself sounds completely different.
Oh, totally. They own homes outright, usually multiple homes. They're creditors, not debtors like most people with mortgages.
Seasonal residences that sit empty most of the time.
Right. Luxury apartments in places like London's Belgrave Square or those super tall Manhattan skyscrapers, often dark, just sitting there as investments, basically. Safe places to park equity.
And then the mansions, 40, 60 rooms.
Yeah, complete with servants' quarters, walk-in vaults for silver, fur, wine. It's a level of existence structured entirely around avoiding any kind of friction or inconvenience found in normal life.
It really makes you ask, what does living like that, completely insulated, completely catered to, what does that do to a person? To their relationships, their grasp on reality?
Well, the argument is it fundamentally warps reality. The staff around them are, quote, obliged to be nice. They had to kiss your ass, basically, and never criticize.
The source mentioned training academies for home staff.
Yeah, quoting journalist Frank Rich, where students are taught never to judge their employers whom they call principals. It's about total deference.
And there were those examples, like feeding dogs fancy steaks.
Right. Feeding Sheets's braised beef tenderloin steaks, sending private jets to pick up a single bottle of wine. These aren't just eccentricities, the source suggests. They show how every whim, no matter how small or absurd, gets catered to. It breeds this profound attachment.
And the effect on the wealthy person themselves.
The source is pretty blunt. It says they become imperious, condescending jerks.
Wow, okay.
And it gives that example of Michael Bloomberg during the 2020 presidential debates. Remember when Elizabeth Warren criticized him directly?
Regularly.
His face was just dumbstruck. The source describes it as the look of a man who's never been criticized to his face for 20 years. Just completely unprepared for direct challenge.
That inability to handle criticism,
Yeah.
it must be amplified by the people around them too, right? The sycophants?
Oh, absolutely. The source mentions leaked tweets involving Elon Musk, where people around him are described as basically competing to kiss the powerful person's ass the most.
So if everyone around you is just telling you how amazing you are.
And anyone who disagrees is just dismissed as, jealous or stupid. You inevitably lose touch with reality. You start to believe you really are fantastic. Maybe even, as the source puts it rather dramatically, the second coming of Christ.
It sounds like an environment that just corrodes empathy, like it just withers away.
That's exactly the argument, that the capacity for empathy gets destroyed, and it leads to this weird paranoia of the ultra-rich.
Paranoia, how so?
They kind of know, deep down, that people around them want something, money, power, access, but don't necessarily like them for who they are, which leads to this profound loneliness.
Even surrounded by people.
Especially surrounded by people who are paid to be there or who want something. The source mentions research suggesting that beyond a certain income level, maybe around $50,000 a year back then, more money doesn't really buy more happiness.
Right, basic needs are met, security is there.
Exactly. But the pursuit of massive wealth beyond that, the source argues, it completely warps the economy and puts insane demonic power in your hands while making personal relationships feel transactional and kind of perverted.
And tragically, this often starts way back in childhood, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's a key point. Many of the super rich grew up rich. And the source paints a bleak picture. Family life a horror show. Maybe rarely seeing parents.
Packed off to boarding school, then summer camp.
Right. It refers to the trauma of the privileged child where wealthy parents essentially offload all the childcare. So the kids end up closer to the nannies or domestic staff than their own parents. Like Winston Churchill, apparently, was closer to his nanny.
So it's a system that the source suggests can kind of deform a person's emotional development right from the start.
That's the argument being made, yes. A potentially damaging psychological environment from a very young age.
Okay, so if that's the kind of internal world, the bubble they live in, let's zoom back out. What are the bigger societal, political consequences of having this class of people with so much power?
Well, the source is very direct here. It states flatly that the billionaire class runs the country.
Runs the country. How does it frame that, like in elections?
Yeah, it describes the last U.S. election, for example, as basically a fight between corporatists, which it identifies with the Democratic Party, specifically Biden and Harris, and oligarchs, represented by Trump.
But both sides had billionaire backing, right?
Exactly. That's the key point. And even when corporations donate, the source argues that corporate wealth is ultimately the property of this same ruling class.
Because they own most of the stock.
Right. The stats cited are pretty stark. The top 1% owns 40% of all U.S. stocks. The top 10% own 84%. So even if there are disagreements within that elite group about who to back,
the overall control, the wealth, stays concentrated right at the top, regardless of who wins an election.
that's the picture painted. Power remains firmly in their hands.
And this leads us to thinking about the effects of decades of what people often call neoliberal policies. Free markets, deregulation.
Less government spending, yeah. The source connects this concentration of power to some major outcomes. Persistent inaction on climate change, for one.
Okay, what else?
This massive redistribution of wealth actively moving upwards, pushing inequality back towards those Gilded Age levels we talked about.
And the fact that wages for most people haven't kept pace with productivity increases since, what, the 70s?
Exactly. Middle and working class pay basically stalled while the gains went elsewhere. And then you have these bubbles in so many markets.
Like the stock market being ludicrously overvalued, real estate prices being stratospheric.
Yeah, crypto bubbles, the whole financial sector, arguably hugely overvalued. The explanation offered is pretty simple.
Mm.
Tax cuts for the rich don't mostly get spent, they get invested.
So you have more and more cash chasing the same basic number of assets, driving prices up.
That's the dynamic described, creating these asset bubbles.
And this is where it gets really, really interesting politically. How this wealth actively distorts the political system itself.
Right. The source makes a pretty bold claim
Mm.
that the wealthy ultimately gave us Trump, even though he used populist language.
How does that work? How does it explain that?
It talks about the actions of the Democratic Party establishment, pointing to things like Obama maybe backing off some progressive promises, or figures like Clinton and Harris not really even pretending to champion working-class issues anymore.
Which leads to cynicism, people just checking out.
Exactly. Cynicism, voter abandonment, especially among the working class. And here's a really provocative part of the argument.
Okay.
The claim is that figures like Clinton and Biden were seen as preferable, not because they were the best candidates to beat Trump, but because they were reliable candidates to beat Bernie Sanders.
To beat Sanders, why was that the priority?
Because, according to the source, the absolute main goal for the donor class, the ultra-rich, was to block any form of social democracy, anything that would mean higher taxes on them.
Wow. It even mentions Lloyd Blankfein, former Goldman Sachs CEO.
Yep, publicly saying he'd rather support Trump than Sanders. It's presented as evidence that protecting their wealth trumps even traditional party loyalties or political ideologies.
So the idea is that the promise of liberalism, things like social safety nets, equality, it gets broken on the rocks of capitalism the moment it actually costs the rich too much.
That's the core assertion. Liberalism is fine until it threatens their bottom line.
Okay. So beyond just policy and elections, how does this extreme wealth shape, like, the social fabric? The source talks about class segregation.
Yeah, it argues that markets just naturally tend to sort people by class, and the ways the rich signal their status have kind of evolved.
How so? It used to be obvious, right? Like top hats and tails in the Gilded Age.
Exactly. Very conspicuous finery. Today, it's often more subtle, maybe even boring clothes. Think Bill Gates in his sweaters, Elon Musk in T-shirts.
But those are still incredibly expensive clothes, right? Just not flashy.
Right. They're stratospherically expensive, but deliberately low-key. It's signaling, but mainly to other wealthy people who recognize the brands or the quality. It's not meant for mass consumption display in the same way.
Though some things are still pretty conspicuous. Watches, yachts, private jets.
Oh, for sure. Those haven't gone away. And it ties back to Thorstein Veblen's old idea of conspicuous consumption, spending lavishly just to show off wealth. The source even extends this to having staff who visibly do nothing, like a senior butler just standing there purely as a display of how much wealth you have to waste.
And C. Wright Mills, in The Power Elite, also talked about these subtle signals, right? Knowing the right ski resorts, the right vacation spots.
Exactly. Codes and signals understood only by the initiated. It reinforces the exclusivity.
There was that anecdote in the source about the friend with the unmarked private dining club in Midtown Manhattan.
Yeah, totally anonymous from the outside. You'd walk right past it. It just highlights, again, how they live in this non-reality environment, this fantasy land.
But a fantasy land with immense real-world power. Power that, the source argues, ends up destroying things because they can't accurately judge reality.
It makes you think of that photo, remember, of Hillary Clinton looking sort of bewildered in a working-class person's kitchen. It became a meme, symbolizing that huge disconnect.
Yeah, that captures it perfectly.
It really does. It's ironic, isn't it? Society talks a lot about inclusion, but the economy often seems designed to cater to people who specifically want exclusion, reinforcing how abjectly disconnected they are from everyday life.
So after all of this, what does it mean for us, for society? Aristotle's point looms large, doesn't it? When oligarchs take control, the only options left are tyranny or revolution.
It's a stark warning from ancient history that feels maybe uncomfortably relevant. Given everything we've discussed, the big question is, where do we possibly go from here? Especially when political reform seems so difficult in a system dominated by this kind of wealth.
Is the system even fixable through politics? The source seems skeptical about the Democratic Party, given the power of the donor class.
It does express skepticism there, But it also suggests that perhaps the most immediate, tangible hope for change isn't in Washington, but maybe in the resurgence of the labor movement.
The unions, like the recent organizing efforts.
Exactly. Think about all the activity, hundreds of Starbucks stores organizing, that big Amazon warehouse win at JFK in Staten Island, the UAW making inroads in the South. It points to a shift towards real collective action on the ground,
So people taking power back directly in their workplaces.
potentially. Our whole deep dive today really traced how this insulated world of extreme wealth can lead to, well, a lack of empathy, a warped view of reality affecting everything from personal lives right up to national policy.
Yeah.
And if you connect that back to the feeling many people have, feeling kind of bummed out, overwhelmed by politics, the source offers an interesting antidote.
Agree.
Basically, shut down your screens and create collectives. Get involved in actual physical groups.
Like a union group or a local protest or just community organizing.
Yeah. Anything that involves real human connection and collective action. The idea is that this engagement can be a powerful cure for bad vibes, for that feeling of powerlessness, and it starts laying the groundwork for maybe a more equitable future.
So it highlights this deep contradiction, doesn't it?
Hmm.
A system built on exclusion and maybe even psychological damage.
And the potential solution being found in connection, in solidarity, and people actually working together, it suggests that maybe our most powerful tool for change is simply connecting with each other.